Hello to everyone attending the National Association for Community College Entrepreneurship's Future Building Summit. A big thank you to Dr. Rebecca Corbin for inviting me today. I want to acknowledge Dr. Sharon Pierce, the president of Minneapolis Community and Technical College, Dr. Ron Thomas, the former president of Dakota County Technical College, and Elaine Marshall. Hi, Elaine. Well, maybe she's not on right now, but I know Elaine, the North Carolina Secretary of State. I am so glad to be part of your annual conference. This year's theme, Entrepreneurship in America's Heartland, could not be more timely. I want to recognize the work that your organization has done to support community college students during this incredibly challenging period. Through unprecedented times, you all banded together, virtually of course, to provide students with the resources and opportunities they need to continue working toward their futures and launching their careers. As a co-chair of the Senate Entrepreneurship Caucus, I'm invested in ensuring the economy we pass down to the next generation is one in which they will be able to get ahead. That means focusing on a competitive agenda for America, because America is at its best when we are a country that thinks, that invents, that makes stuff, that exports to the world. And key to achieving this competitive agenda is prioritizing education. To me, community colleges are launching pads for opportunity, for bold new ideas that will make a permanent mark on our world. I know it from my own personal life. My grandpa worked 1,500 feet underground in the iron ore mines of northern Minnesota. He never graduated from high school, but he saved money in a coffee can in the basement to send my dad to college. My dad graduated from a community college, Vermilion Community College, which was then known as Ely Junior College, and he then went on and got a journalism degree from the University of Minnesota. He went on to be a nationally renowned sports writer and newspaper columnist, and it all started with his 2-year degree. My mom was a public teacher who taught second grade until she was 70 years old. I learned the value of education from my parents and grandparents. That's why I support making community college for 1- and 2-year degrees and certifications tuition free. By the way, my sister also went to a community college. She hadn't graduated from high school like a number of kids, and she ended up getting her GED and then going to 2-year, and then eventually got her 4-year degree. So I lived this, and I've seen the change that it's made in people's lives. With more funding for community college, entrepreneurships, and skills training, we can tear down financial barriers for workers who are beginning or transitioning into new careers. Laying the groundwork for different paths to success isn't about lowering standards for new employees. It addresses a very real problem in our economy that I hear all over Minnesota, the skills gap. Simply put, there are employees who want jobs, and there are employers who need employees with the skills to fill the jobs they have. We're going to have over 100,000 openings for nursing assistants and 60,000 openings for electricians. We're not going to have a shortage of sports marketing degrees. We're going to have a shortage of plumbers. We need to do more to address both the skills gap and the opportunity gap in the long run. By the way, I don't have a problem with sports marketing degrees. I just like to point out that we got to make sure that we look at a lot of these 1- and 2-year degrees and how they actually feed into jobs we have available today and tomorrow. We know there are smart, hardworking people in every corner of our country, and we must invest in them. This investment is not only good for workers, it's good for our entire economy. A 2019 study by the Midwest Economic Policy Institute found that every dollar spent on entrepreneurship programs in Minnesota increases our GDP by $21. And by making sure these programs are open and accessible to women and people of color, we can also create more equity in our workforce. And by the way, we need the workers. We need women and people of color to be going into careers that maybe they would not have picked in the past, some of these high-paying trades jobs. And the only way you do it is by being mentors and by making sure you give them the opportunities. I work with my colleagues across the aisle on several bills to help workers access entrepreneurship, skills training, apprenticeships, and the way I see it, this legislation goes hand in hand with my bills to support small businesses and promising startups, because lifting up our workforce means focusing on the long-term creation of good-paying jobs. Today's new ideas and side projects are tomorrow's booming businesses, and it will be our nation's students who lead the way. By promoting and fostering entrepreneurship education, your efforts have already made a big difference. But working together, we will continue to invest in community college and skills training and ensure our economy is prepared to welcome the next generation of entrepreneurs. I'm glad to be your partner in Washington, fighting to make sure our workforce has the tools that we need to succeed in the 21st century. Thank you, everyone.
Well, we greatly appreciate Senator Klobuchar and her work and the time that she and her staff have spent with us to better understand the role that community colleges can play through this network and through our growing alliances with all of you. So our greatest thanks to her for her support and the good work that she does in the system. It's now my pleasure to introduce a very special guest next who's going to deliver some remarks. Dr. Gene Giovannini has been a mentor to me. He's a former NACCE board chair, and he is somebody, I think, that embraces what we were talking about earlier in terms of that bold vision. He had this concept that we talked about 6 or 7 years ago about the hub and the spokes and how we could really scale what we're doing. And now with some of the conversations that we've been invited to in DC of thinking about how can we support the good work that's going on at the SBA level and how open they are to suggestions from our network. So it is my sincere pleasure to welcome Dr. Gene Giovannini, who is going to deliver some remarks from Tarrant County College District.
Good afternoon, and thank you for having me. Adopting an entrepreneurial mindset within our colleges is part of a mission to better serve our students and our communities. It is more than building curriculum and offering courses and programs with entrepreneurship in the title. We must ask how we instill entrepreneurial principles and practices in every college person. To build an ecosystem, all need to imbue an entrepreneurial mindset as part of a culture. In part, I have been asked to share experiences of building an entrepreneurial mindset and strategy. Every experience is shared to help you map your own entrepreneurial ecosystem, from leveraging college and industry assets, through incubation programs and building a corporate college model, to the importance of trust and scalability. This is a journey that demands thinking about things in new and different ways, and challenging long-held assumptions. The Center for Entrepreneurial Innovation was created in response to the need for wet lab and rentable research space and a business incubator for startups in various industry sectors, such as technology, energy, biosciences, and software. The goal was about accessing and scaling what a business needed today, tomorrow, and years to come, all with the objective of job creation at its core. Investors included the college, the city, United States Economic Development Administration, and private industry. CEI built an entrepreneurial ecosystem, creating networks, partnerships, and support in and around the entrepreneurs and its clients. Specifically, the ecosystem included open book accounting, monthly and quarterly reviews, an on-site intellectual property attorney, 3D printing capabilities, 80 pro bono mentors, and a competitive intelligence lab. Entrepreneurs benefited from the services of executives in residence, support staff for general administrative needs, marketing, public relations, and general operations. CEI serves as a critical example for building an entrepreneurial ecosystem. If you encourage the creation of networks, partnerships, and support in and around your entrepreneurs, your people, and your clients, and this new mindset and improvement for innovation collaboration, you will flourish. Over the years, I've grown to appreciate the phrase, seeing is believing. If you can show people you can deliver, you will start building trust. When you show the capacity to lead by example, whether you, the ecosystem, or organization, trust will thrive. That's what's experienced via the creation of the CEI. CEI's success led to the development of the Discovery Triangle, a 25 square mile economic redevelopment area. The Discovery Triangle is an asset that is rich to the region, primed for development, redevelopment, and reinvestment that CEI catalyzed. We mapped the area, highlighting assets, land, warehouses, and innovation potential. We helped recruit businesses to launch here, promoted the effort through local chambers of commerce, and maximized opportunities for the developing light rail system. Trust was critical in making the Discovery Triangle happen. CEI's proven concept, physical space, and support through programmatic offerings helped leverage and attract other interested parties. People quickly saw results and began to develop trust. Developing win-win relationships requires one to bring value to the table. We must always return to the community need and recommendations and appeal to mission, desires, and interests, building genuine relationships and centered on consistently evaluating and communicating the value behind the why. This creates buy-in and longevity. Building a corporate college model provided many valuable insights. The background, resources, and tools provided here serve as a blueprint. Some objectives and goals may look different depending upon your internal and external stakeholders, but the strategy of vetting ideas, defining intentions, evaluating returns on investments, establishing community positioning, and garnering philanthropic support are necessary to explore and consider. A corporate college should be established to transition customized business services, contract training, and continuing education into a fiscally driven structure and solution. The mission of a corporate college should create an on-delivery, high-quality, customized training, as well as learning and development services to both organizations and businesses in order to advance their strategic initiatives and competitive advantages in the workforce. To build a corporate college or any ecosystem, leveraging an entrepreneurial mindset, you need externally driven big-picture concepts, clearly identified programmatic needs, and visioning areas to explore in detail. Never lose sight of projecting future needs, though. Your leadership team, the culture you build, the trust you develop, the relationships you nurture, and how you shape your ecosystem will help sustain and maintain your college's mission. When you derail from that, and you will, always return to your why. Borrowing from Stephen Covey, ask what is the mission of your college? And how can you leverage this to create meaningful impact for the economy? Where do you envision campus and community partnerships? How do these connect to needs and recommendations? The tools, questions, and approaches in building and executing a business incubator or corporate college can be adapted to the hub and spokes model. By definition, the hub and spokes model seeks to create physical spaces and virtual resources to be shared across a robust network of community colleges throughout multiple regions. The selected hub location should have access to training facilities, current models for effective co-working, and resources spanning from strong industry partnerships to a home community college. The spokes connecting and orbiting the hub can include a number of different geographic regions. Spokes would benefit from the resources the hub provides, and in turn offer their own geographic areas with centralized resources, support, and programmatic offerings. The hub and spokes model encourages a nationwide movement. The strategies, tactics, and development tools discussed earlier are still relevant as each hub and service region can deploy similar to a sustainable ecosystem. Think about location, existing resources, and leveraging what is already at your fingertips. We must do this. Stretch, grow, and explore beyond the ordinary. Our communities need us. Thank you.
We thank the Chancellor for his good work, and we have many colleagues here from Tarrant County College, and we appreciate you so much. And just as a reminder, we're also being joined by hundreds of people online. We have 41 states participating today. We have some local stakeholders, and it's all really in pursuit of what we are doing together. So at this time, it's my pleasure to welcome a thought leader who has a wonderful story to tell. Also, as I mentioned earlier, the Kauffman Foundation has been supportive of NACCE's work literally from day one. So it is my absolute pleasure to welcome Philip Gaskin, who serves as the Vice President of Entrepreneurship for the Ewing Marion Kauffman Foundation, to come up on stage and share with us a little bit of his story and what the Kauffman Foundation is doing to advance ecosystem work. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. First, it's really embarrassing when you wear the same outfit that's on the picture. Not plan that. No, did not plan that. Thank you all. Thank you here and out online. I am, Senator Klobuchar's words really rang true to me, and some things that I'll share about opportunity, or a lack of access to opportunity, lack of access to support, knowledge, and funding, and all of those things that can get in the way of entrepreneurship. And I was 34 years old when I first heard a word that would change my life. It was at a celebration of life ceremony for my father. And after the service, a man came up to me and he said, he didn't know my father that well, but he said, "Your father was a good man. He was a really good entrepreneur." Now, in my 34 years, here's what I know about my father and the man who raised me. I knew he was a dark-skinned man that grew up in rural North Carolina during Jim Crow. I knew he had played baseball. I wanted to play baseball in the Negro League, but he got hurt. I knew he moved to Los Angeles from North Carolina because it was seen as a new frontier for black men. I knew he spent years working maintenance at stores and offices, and I knew that in his late 40s, he opened up one convenience store and then another. But I had never known that my dad was an entrepreneur. In fact, I never even knew what the word meant. So now how can that be, right? So riddle me this. How can a man grow up in America, go to college, and not know the word entrepreneur until he's 34 years old? And well, that's the answer to that riddle. The answer to that riddle is what I'm going to share with you today. Because understanding why I didn't know that word entrepreneur may be the key to unlocking billions, even trillions of dollars in economic development for our communities, while creating opportunities for millions who don't have it right now. The truth is that the last great untapped economic force in America is hiding in plain sight. And so are the institutions that are best positioned to propel it. So this is where the story comes back to my father. We lived near a long street in Los Angeles that crossed through many kinds of neighborhoods. And so for us, it was more than a boulevard. It was more like a Berlin Wall, because the life experiences were vastly different depending on what side of that boulevard you lived on. If you lived on the north side of the street, you were in a zip code that had a very good reputation. And these were children of parents that were very famous and or had good reputations, right? They all knew what entrepreneurs were. But if you lived on the south side, just one block away, in a different zip code, like myself, different experiences. And that wasn't all that was different. It was the edge of where those other people lived, where the grass wasn't as green, the houses weren't as big, the future wasn't as bright, the ambulances didn't get there as fast. The police sure did. Just one block away. So my dad and I had a ritual starting in the 5th grade. He'd pick me up after school, and about 4 times a month we'd go to a bank. Sometimes it was the same bank. Finally I said to him, "Why do we go to so many banks? He said, I'll tell you when you get older. One of those, same thing you said about the facts of life. I'll tell you when you get older. Turns out he was trying to get that first loan to open a chain of convenience stores. But he lived one zip code away from what they considered worthy. Just that one block away. You know, he didn't know about redlining. He didn't know that banks literally drew red lines on a map, you know, between those that they would lend to and those they wouldn't. But he was always the other. And this went on for 4 years. Time after time, he was told he just wasn't worthy. And so it wasn't just my father who had that sense of other. So did I. In high school, I was a really good student. I took honors courses and I did well. But when I told my guidance counselor that I wanted to apply to Ivy League schools, he said, "You? You're not Ivy League material." So I never applied. Right? You know how long that stayed with me in life? You know, how much it limited me in the years that followed. So it's hard to overstate what it does to a person day after day to be seen as the other, of being told again and again that you're not enough. It's hard to describe the anger, the frustration, and that urge to act it out in a society that will condemn you if you do. So why do I tell you all this? Well, it turns out I learned the definition of entrepreneur in time to realize that there are millions of people across America today who have the same genius as my father. But too many of them live that one block away, or that one rural county away. Too many are seen as the other. But I believe they represent the greatest untapped source of economic growth and development in America today. This is where all of you come in. You out there too. I believe the institutions that are in the best position to support the other, to play a role in unleashing their ability and talent, is also hiding in plain sight. After all, who knows more about being the other than you? America's community colleges. Together you make up one of the largest systems of higher education on the planet. And yet, for more than a century, you've been underestimated. You know, we tend to look to four-year colleges and universities as the end-all, be-all of learning. And yet, in 2020, the Census Bureau found that less than 3 in 10 Americans will ever earn a four-year college degree. What about the other 70%? Why do we insist on seeing community college merely as a last resort? And why on earth do we still believe that the primary mission of community colleges is to serve as a 2-year way station on the way to 4-year college degree? All of you are excellent at what you do. Yet, despite your best efforts, Columbia University has found that while 81% of students entering community college say aspire to earn a 4-year degree, but only 15% of them actually do so. It's because life, you know, kids, family, debts, all those things get in the way. Now, it may not be my place to say, but maybe it's time for community colleges to focus on something else. We all know what is happening in too many communities. The economy's changing. Every job, from plumbing to data entry to accounting, is being radically transformed by digital technology. Most people don't know what to do about it. We've got employers that have open jobs that they don't know how to fill. We've got potential employees that have skills, but they don't know how to market them. High school graduates have diplomas that feel like tickets to nowhere. Why? Well, I believe we have a leadership vacuum, because at the national level, no one is consistently leading this conversation. Senator Klobuchar's remarks were very, very meaningful, and I appreciate them a great deal. That's exactly what we need. At the local level, nobody knows how to lead the transformation. So from where I've said, all of you have the power that nobody else in this country can match. You sit at the center of every community in America that needs a way forward. Now, I'm sure some of you in the audience have taught physics. So you know that lesson about what it takes to move impossible amounts of weight. It comes down to the lever and the fulcrum. So the further the fulcrum is from the weight, the harder it is to lift it. And the closer the fulcrum is to the weight, the easier it is to lift and move just about anything. Well, I believe that community colleges can be that fulcrum. If you look at the great universities, many are not in the center of town in the same way that community colleges are. So by definition, you are closer to the challenges and the realities that are on the ground, in the best position to convene those conversations that we were hearing about, connecting local employers, citizens, elected officials, and to train workers for careers that meet local needs while making a good living. You're already at the heart of America's communities, and you have everything you need to be the heartbeat of those communities. So now you invited me here today to talk about ecosystem building on campus, but I want you to think bigger than that. Much, much bigger. I want community colleges to see yourselves as the vital center of an entrepreneurial ecosystem across your entire community. So how do you do this? How do you network with the mayor's office? How do you remove those barriers that stand in the way, or get everyone in town to come to you and see you as the place where conversation and inspiration happen, where all parties come together and create solutions? So at the Kauffman Foundation, we have identified 7 design principles for ecosystem building some of you may be familiar with. And these are the principles that need to be baked into everything ecosystem builders do. First, put entrepreneurs front and center. If entrepreneurs are not in the room, creative thinking and ideas for solutions may not happen. Second, foster conversations. Listen most of the time. Make sure everyone is heard. Third, enlist collaborators and invite everyone. Always think and ask the question, who is not in the room that should be here? Fourth, live the values you are trying to achieve. So this includes everything that I'm saying on this list. Fifth, connect people from the bottom up, from the outside in, from the top down. Everyone has a role in ecosystem building. It's a team sport. Sixth, tell your community's authentic story. Be authentic and embrace the strengths and gifts of your own community versus trying to emulate somewhere else. How many times do we hear, how do we become the next Silicon Valley? No offense to anyone coming from Silicon Valley. It's incredibly and wonderfully dense network, but it can be exclusive. It's hard to get in. And seventh, start and then be patient. Trust building and creating a new model of economic development like we're talking about takes time. It's about building a culture, that says those who live one block over, we see you. We understand your dreams, and we're going to help make them a reality. And so again, at Kauffman Foundation, we work with organizations to build those ecosystems, because our passion is to change the conditions for entrepreneurs by changing the systems in which they operate. And so in our hometown of Kansas City, we're doing this right now. So we're working with over 30 school districts and charter schools through our Real World Learning Initiative. And that's to just reinvent high school and make the K through 12 diploma really mean something. So that if you want to be an employee in a specific discipline, you're then connected to an employer who can take you in right away and see you as valuable. If you want to be an employer, we develop skills for you to go right into a fast-track program on entrepreneurship in order to learn exactly how to do that. And so the work is grounded in the principles of racial equity, diversity, and inclusion, And there are 2 impact goals that we're striving for, and this is Kansas City specific. Goal number 1 is to have a prepared workforce by 2032. And what I mean by that is at least 66% of Black, Indigenous, and other people of color ages 25 to 44 living in Kansas City will have a good job. Goal number 2 is that by 2032, 7,500 entrepreneurs in the Kansas City metro region, the whole metro, who are Black, Indigenous, and other people of color will start, grow, or sustain a business. And so by focusing on these populations, we're creating a virtuous cycle so that if they succeed, everyone else will be able to succeed. It's part of what we call America's New Business Plan, which you can find on our website. It's our bipartisan policy that focuses on creating new jobs and rebuilding an equitable economy that works for everyone. Mayors use this plan, entrepreneurs use this plan, ecosystem builders use this plan, and so can all of you. Highly recommend it. It's how you become the heartbeat of a community. You know, I'd love to see every community college have a CEO, a chief entrepreneurial officer. Who has just one job. Like we say, the field goal kicker, you got one job, just make the extra point. To entrepreneurially and creatively think about everything on campus and in the community all day, every day. And to constantly find innovative ways to connect the two. To be there for people like my dad. Well, you know, after hearing no from bank after bank after bank, he finally heard yes. A Black-owned bank in South Los Angeles saw him as worthy and gave him a loan. And I remember how elated he was. He said, someone finally trusted me. And those investments paid off. My dad wasn't just a good entrepreneur, he was a good asset to the community. Because for 20 years, he created jobs and gave back to the neighborhood. And so again, this is not about taking from one place and putting into another, not from taking from another population, giving to another. It's about seeing, that America will be more innovative if people like my dad have the same opportunity as everyone else to succeed and thrive. And it's about recognizing that community colleges are not an afterthought, but the heartbeat of communities with the potential to bring all parties together to compete and win in the digital economy. It's time for all of us to look that one block over, to see the genius that's waiting to be ignited and the millions of entrepreneurs who just need a chance to show what they can do. They're not the other. They're us. They're all of us. They're the future of this country. And it's long past time that we recognize, like it or not, that we are all in this together. And that's exactly how it should be. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Philip. That was inspirational. We appreciate in this room and the hundreds of people that are listening from around the country, your support and embrace of community college. And I think your comments really connected to the conversation that we've been having. So thank you so much for that. And on your advice, we have been hearing from student entrepreneurs. We are privileged right now to have the opportunity to have a chat with somebody who grew up in an entrepreneurial family, who's leading work at a very deep level, and it is a true honor for us to welcome Assistant Secretary Alejandro Castillo, who is with us today live. Thank you, Madam Secretary, for joining us. Your path in life and career path is so interesting. It goes all the way back to the Clinton administration, and I would be here for 20 minutes reading your bio, so we're not gonna do that. We're gonna have a chat. And we're also going to invite, we'll have time for a couple of questions from the audience. I know people are really excited to hear from you. So let's begin. We have been talking on this multi-day conference, and we've also heard some inspirational words from the Kauffman Foundation about the importance of entrepreneurship, but also equity, inclusion, and diversity. And as I was reading about you, you talk about your early experience growing up in the Bronx as a child of entrepreneurs. And maybe let's start there and share with us a bit about your story. Where did you come from? What was that like? How did it shape you?
So first of all, thank you very much, Dr. Corbin. This is, I've been listening to the numerous panels, and it's, the anchor word is transformation. I will tell you, I grew up, I lived in Queens. My father had a bodega in the Bronx, but in that journey every day that he took to have his business, I had such an incredible experience of watching the city of New York in perhaps one of its worst times during the 70s, and really appreciating neighborhoods that were different from mine, recognizing the role that government plays, but also recognizing the role that colleges, community colleges, universities, entrepreneurs, innovators, as well as public servants. So that's what fed my world at a very young age. But more importantly, recognizing also, as so many of your previous speakers have said, the power of the collective, or as you said, the power of possibilities. And I borrowed that phrase from, you just mentioned it not too long ago, because that's where we are today, the power of possibilities. We've been challenged with a pandemic. We're looking at how do we redesign, reimagine communities and the role that community colleges play. So my inspiration towards education came from a graduation that I attended at a very young age at Lehman College in the Bronx, where my uncles who were immigrants went to school there. And that's what sparked my own pursuit of education in so many ways. So I want to thank the audience and this incredible organization for the work that you do day in and day out.
That's wonderful. And we connect with you, I think, because of, I think, your spirit of connecting with all of us. And as Philip said so beautifully about community colleges, and Senator Klobuchar kicked us off this morning, they sit at the intersection, at the heart of communities, and that's really where you come from. And we share that with you. And it sounds, you mentioned about public service, and I have really experienced that in a profound way. Many of you who know me know the story even of Administrator Isabel Guzman reached out to me and to NACCE prior to even being put up for confirmation. And I sort of think of you, Madam Secretary, in the same vein of reaching out to us. We don't have to go through all these barriers, and the fact that you're with us today. So tell us a bit about how you see public service, because you've not only worked for the government, but you've worked for nonprofits, and what does that mean, and how is that embedded in you and your colleagues that are now in Washington, really with the building back and tackling all these problems?
So first of all, please call me Alejandra. I still kind of, the titles can be a bit not overwhelming, but not unnecessary, truly. This conversation is really about community and public service, and I think this is where you all play such an incredible role to inspire the next generation of individuals to understand how we can have jobs, but more importantly, how do we have jobs that fill our passion? And the passion of giving back, and the passion of truly being the architects of the future. And as President Biden has challenged us to think about this moment, not only to build back, but to build back better. That's where the richness of the role that we all play, because as someone said, we all have a role to play in this process, can really come to life. I chose public service. I chose doing public service at the federal level, but there is important public service that has to happen at the local, state level as well. Not to mention public service from a nonprofit platform, not to mention the work that your previous speakers play in terms of public service from a philanthropic space, and also without doubt, from an educational component. So community colleges, we tend to see them at times mostly as workforce development spaces, but I would also join the voices that have already spoken that it is also hubs of innovation and technology and entrepreneurship. So those are the areas where I think the connectivity, the connected tissues, so that we can create synergy and not just be one-offs. We can spend our lives making investments and looking at things in a very linear perspective. But to elevate the word that you have also focused on, which is transformation, in order for us to really be transformative, we cannot continue to see the world in a very linear space. We need to figure out, how does this all connect? What's that Rubik cube that is going to make things happen? And that's what's exciting of this moment in time.
Beautifully said, Alejandra. It's very much the intersection, the point, and the opportunity. And what we've been speaking about as a community of people that want change and are going to take action is really we come to the table thinking there are enough resources. As Chip Weismiller said earlier in the day, money is really not the problem. There are a lot of funding opportunities. The federal government has a lot of funding. And how can we organize ourselves to ensure that we make the same kind of impact that the Kauffman Foundation sets aggressive goals and are doing that. So to that end, I would love it if you could maybe share with us sort of an overall vision of some of the grants that you have that are coming out. There's a lot of excitement in our community, both people who are here and people who are online. We've had some meetings, but maybe just give us sort of an overview of why this is so important. And I know we have a couple folks in the audience that have some questions, so we're going to have a mic, a couple of opportunities just to ask you a few things.
And I'm excited about those questions, but let me take a moment to just take a step back, because we talk about the Economic Development Administration. We're actually one of 12 different agencies within the broader family of what is the U.S. Department of Commerce. And I'm sure so many of you may know this, but just indulge me for a moment, because it's important. Commerce is not just EDA, it's the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. So we're talking about NOAA. And within that realm, we're talking about the blue economy. How do we look at climate change and respond to the challenges of climate change, as well as the opportunities? Commerce is also the Census Bureau. So when we talk about population, the changes in population, what the movement of population, and looking at the broader future of our own population, census is critical. Someone mentioned USPTL, US Patent and Trademark. So not only do we want to encourage entrepreneurs, we want to encourage their innovative gifts, so to speak. How do we protect their intellectual property? That's where patent and trademark comes in. So USPTO. We also look at international trade, which is another agency of the Department of Commerce, and looking at, once we have these entrepreneurs, where can we get the markets for them, not just domestically, but also globally? National Institute of Standards and Technology, another very important agency within the Department of Commerce, which is really an incredible entity to look at technology and innovation. So there are more. Can't forget National Telecommunication and Information. So as we think about broadband and access to broadband, let's think about NTIA. Now that I've done that little primer, which I always think is fascinating, how does EDA come into play? And again, one of the words that has been mentioned multiple times is ecosystem. EDA is really there to create that ecosystem for economic development. Not only do we do the process of economic development planning and technical assistance, but as you mentioned, Dr. Corbin, in the American Rescue Plan, which was announced by Secretary Raimundo not too long ago, there are 6 different types of grants, and we're very excited about it because these grants were designed to really bring from the bottom up those solutions. One of the big ones that I want to focus on is the Build Back Better Challenge, which is a $1 billion grant that the competition was designed to make sure that we have everyone at the table. So not just government, nonprofits, for-profits, community colleges, universities, entrepreneurs, but really looking at ideas that are going to really scale and spark economic development. And I will tell you, the secret sauce is partnership. which at times can be very difficult, but that's exactly what we're looking for. Who are the partners at the table, and how are we looking at regional economic development? The next one, so on the Build Back Better, the deadline is fast approaching. So October 19th is when we want to make sure that everyone has at least a concept paper. If you want more information on it, there are multiple webinars that can walk you through it. The other one is the Good Jobs, which is looking at workforce development also from an industry perspective. And that one is $500 million that we're looking to engage communities on that. I can go down the list, but for the interest of time with regards to the Q&A, which is where I think is the richness of this effort, I will direct you to go to eda.gov. You'll see the American Rescue Plan and the 6 different grants that are available. But the way I started this answer was reminding you all that commerce is very big, and there are other grant opportunities that I encourage you all to look at. The last thing I'll say is, please keep an eye on what's happening with regard to the reconciliation. It's not just a word, it's not just Washington speak. These are the funding opportunities that our government is putting down to make that big bet of where the future is going to lie. And community colleges have an incredible role to play. So those are funding opportunities that are coming down the pike, and that I want to make sure that everyone is paying attention, because it's fast approaching, and hopefully it definitely will be transformative for our country. So thank you for the question.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm looking around the room, and I think we have a question over here. Erica? Yeah, I think you had your hand up. Yeah. Yeah. And maybe introduce yourself, please.
Hello, Madam Secretary. Alejandra, sorry about that.
Thank you, appreciate it.
So my name is Andy Gold. I'm a community college educator in Tampa, Florida at HCC. I did grow up in New York City, so as you were talking about the 1970s, I was there as well, so I had some scary flashbacks to that period of time. The question I have for you is, where do you see the role of the EDA in terms of really igniting something of meaning within the community college system? And what role specifically should the federal government play in that respect?
So sorry about the scary flashbacks. Indeed, I too get those most of the time. But it is a reminder of what happens when there is disinvestments in communities, and I think we both lived that. The turning point now is we are making critical investments, and these are investments not just for what's happening today, what's in front of us, but really investments that are going to build that arc of the future, which is where are we going with technology and innovation, making sure that we are not only coupling the pursuit of technology, innovation, entrepreneurship, but also making sure that we couple it with workforce development. I believe that technology should not be a displacement of good paying jobs, but a creator of good paying jobs. And that's where I think community colleges have an important role to play. It's working together with the technology innovation sector, entrepreneurs, to really be ahead of the curve and say, okay, what are the jobs, the skills that the future workforce is going to need, as well as how can you become incubators of those future companies and those future entrepreneurs. So there's a lot that community colleges must play and be at the table. If I can put out an invitation, as you know, federal government as well as state government and local governments need your voices. And we have several advisory councils. Right now we have the National Advisory Council on Innovation and Entrepreneurship, which we are asking for applications. And that's where I think we need the voice of community colleges to really continue to guide the federal government in how we not only make the investments, but how we also think about the future of communities across the country. Another thing I will tell you, what is EDA's plan? We revisited our investment priorities, of which equity is at the top. We have 7 different investment priorities. Resiliency is one as well, looking at indigenous communities, transitions of whole communities. So again, I invite you to take a look at our website so that you can see more specifically what is driving our investments across the country. Thank you for the question.
That's a great question, Andy. Thank you. And we have time for one quick question. I think, Christine, if you go quickly,
We'll
thank
go
you.
quickly. Thank you very much for your time. I'm Christine Pigsley with Minnesota State University, Mankato. And one of the things that I heard you say is that there are webinars out there. What are some of the other ways that America's small communities, those community colleges in rural areas where EDA seems very big to us, how can we build our capacity to go after some of these amazing funds that are now available?
Great question.
Thank you for the question, and that's EDA can feel and sound very big. So let me break it down, because I'm a big believer. How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. Let's take it down into morsels. EDA has 6 different regions. You have Philadelphia, Austin, Chicago, Atlanta, and Seattle. In those 6 regions, we have representatives in most 50 states and territories. I would really recommend build the relationship. Reach out to us. I know it can feel a little daunting and sometimes a little big, but reach out to us, because our team of EDA specialists are there to, 1, walk you through the process, 2, give you technical assistance and guidance, and also work with you, not only in terms of brainstorming, but also in terms of how do you put it all together. That's the technical assistance that I would invite you to avail yourself from. If you've done that already, I will also say that it is in the secret sauce, as I mentioned before, is in the partnership. So look at what your partners in the area or in the space are doing. And then there are other organizations that we work very closely with, like the National Association of Economic Development Specialists, NATO. The webinars that I mentioned are webinars. We've done so many different webinars just to break down what the Build Back Better Challenge is all about. And that's the invitation that I'm extending. If you're thinking about a Build Back Better, don't go at it alone, because that's not what that it was designed for, collaboration and cooperation. So ask around. I'm sure there are some folks in your communities that are thinking about the Build Back Better, and join in that effort, because you will bring an enormous amount of assets to the table to make that proposal successful. So thank you so much. I know I'm getting the cue that you are moving on to the next one, but I want to make myself available, and reach out to us at any time. We're here to help, and these are exciting moments. So thank you very much for the invitation to speak today.
Thank you so much. Let's give her a round of applause so much. And I would encourage everybody during the ending segment, I know some of you have to run to the airport, but we have dessert and coffee at the end. Try to find other people. I know there are folks who are virtual, a large number of them online, but reach out if you're looking for somebody perhaps to connect to. Maybe go through the NACCE office. We'll try to make those connections for you. So we have one final little chat we want to share on the lunch session, and then we're going to take a super short break, and then we're going to come back with a couple of funding panels. So these are leaders of family foundations and corporate social responsibility that are going to give us additional insights. So please make sure when we do the break you come back. So thank you so much.
It's my pleasure to have the opportunity to have a conversation with a leader who first exposed me to ecosystem building. When I started at NACCE 7 years ago, I didn't really know a lot about ecosystem building, and I thought I knew a little bit about entrepreneurship, but it's been a journey here. So as part of today's Future Building Summit, I am delighted to welcome Deb Hoover, who serves as the president of the Burton D. Morgan Foundation. We're going to talk about some of her work that's been going on well past a decade. She's a leader in the field. Welcome, Deb. Thank you for joining us today at the Future Building Summit.
Oh, thank you, Rebecca. I'm really delighted to be invited and delighted to talk to your viewers and listeners.
That's great. And I know you inhabit the area of philanthropic stewardship and leadership. And when I think about one of my favorite books, Good to Great, I think about the story of Stanley Galt that's embedded in Jim Cullen's book. And then my brain naturally goes to you and your foundation and the work that you do. So why don't we begin our conversation? Tell us a little bit about you, your journey into this work, and then share a bit about the Burton D. Morgan Foundation and some of the work that you're doing in Northeastern Ohio.
Sure, I'd be happy to. And I just want to second that mention of Stan Galt, who he's among our stellar and wonderful trustees, and we're very grateful to him for all he did for the foundation. So I'm president and CEO of Burton D. Morgan Foundation. I've been in that role since 2007. And I've worked in philanthropy since 1994. I'm absolutely passionate about the field and especially passionate about working at the intersection of philanthropy and entrepreneurship. It's a really exciting place to be. Entrepreneurship in and of itself is not necessarily a charitable activity, so it can be tricky business to wrap that charitable purpose, which we have to do working in philanthropy around entrepreneurship activities and ecosystem building that support entrepreneurs in our community. But even though it's tricky business, it's just really fascinating and very gratifying to be able to help entrepreneurs and the communities in which they work. I came to this work through a liberal arts education, and then I supplemented that with a law degree. Working in philanthropy, obviously there are a lot of IRS rules that need to be complied with, so it's really good to have that legal background. I think my favorite part of the job is supporting opportunities for students to wrap venture ideas around their passions and their studies, and then see a business come to fruition. I've been at this long enough, so I've seen undergrads experiment with ideas and start smaller ventures while they're still at college and university, and then watch them mature into, sustainable businesses and very, very capable entrepreneurs themselves. So it's just wonderful work, and I feel really privileged to be able to do it.
Yeah, I can tell you're excited about it. You kind of remind me of myself. Like once I start talking about it, it just lights up, my world, because I think what you said about, people can come into a profession and a passion from multiple different sources. And I think that's what I learned from you. I think when we met 6 or 7 years ago, and I had just started my job at NACCE, and I appreciated how always open you were to sort of sharing your journey and your mission. And one of the things that led us to together, talking about more books, is writing our book together, which you were a co-author of, Community Colleges as Incubators of Innovation. And as I was thinking about you yesterday, I went back to the book and I was rereading your chapter. And I just want to read one sentence of something that you wrote that kind of resonated with what you just shared, and I think is really important. Here at the Future Building Summit, we are so fortunate to have elected officials, Secretary of State from North Carolina, Senator Amy Klobuchar, who heads up the Entrepreneurship Caucus, and many, many leaders from other areas. But as you said, philanthropy can be a real driver of change, and it's not just necessarily charity. So real quickly, you wrote, philanthropic leaders have been key players in strategizing and experimenting for over more than a decade to reignite an entrepreneurial culture across the region. And I believe you were speaking about your region, Northeastern Ohio. And I know you came up with a graphic that you shared with us in the book, but maybe speak to us today about ecosystem building. I know the Kauffman Foundation generously sponsored our event today, and Philip Gaskin is going to share a little bit about his experience. But talk to us about what that means to you as a leader and to your state and your region.
Oh, absolutely. I'd be happy to do that. Before I do that, it might be helpful if I just dive for a minute into like the core of the work that the foundation does, because I think that will really shed light on the ecosystem building work. So our foundation has been around for a long time. It was started in 1967 by Burton D. Morgan, who was an entrepreneur extraordinaire, started out in the adhesives business. The mission of the foundation that he started is to champion the entrepreneurial spirit, to contribute to robust entrepreneurial ecosystems, and serve as a leader in entrepreneurship education. We do that, as you said, primarily in Northeast Ohio, and then selectively on a national basis. And so we work with K through 12 students, we work on college and university campuses, and then help to support practicing and aspiring entrepreneurs. And ecosystem building is really at the core of all of that. Those are
Okay, guys, welcome back. Come on in. I'll give you a minute just to settle, and then we'll start up. All right, so that's a quick minute. We'll go here. So welcome, guys. I'm Brian Mattamore. I'm co-founder and chief idea guy at Growth Engine. We're a 20-year-old innovation agency. We're now, I found out this morning, we're now based in New Canaan, Connecticut. We were in Norwalk, then Westport, and then at our homes in Stamford and New Canaan, and so we're going to default to New Canaan. I thought it would be, since we got some teachers in the room, that I could start with a quiz. And so the quiz is this. In 1984, Time's Man of the Year or Person of the Year was... Anybody know? You want to give it a shot? I will tell you it's not Ronald Reagan. It's not Gary Hart. It's not Gorbachev. It's not Ferraro. Anybody? 1984. It was Peter Ueberroth, right? And if you remember that name, he was the one that did the 1984 Los Angeles Olympics and then became the commissioner of Major League Baseball. So why do I mention him? When I looked at his life, he had said early on in his career, he heard a talk from Edward de Bono, and those of you in the creativity field will recognize Edward de Bono. He just passed away, by the way, but he was most famous for lateral thinking, and so the idea was you don't dig deeper holes, you kind of stop digging, go to the side and look for ideas over here. Okay? So, he had said that talk, that 55-minute talk changed his life. Because he said, I realized the importance of creativity in everything I did. All right? And so he went on to be Time's Man of the Year. And I have a very strong bias that creativity can be the great equalizer in our nation. If we talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, those of us in our culture who did not have great starts or the advantages that I may have had, growing up in an upper class, middle class household in Stamford, Connecticut, with ideas create power, right? Ideas create opportunity. And so we've heard over the last 3 days in this conference, I think every one of the award recipients, right, said, oh, I did something different. I colored outside of the lines, right? I thought outside the box. I was a unicorn. We heard this over and over and over again, right? And some of that was based on their why, right? They figured out, what was important to them and followed their passion, and that's critical. I've spent my life, and that's what I'm going to share with you today, on the how. So how do you do that? How do you get breakthrough ideas? And that's what I've been doing for the last 30 years of my life, really exploring very specifically how you get those great ideas, okay? And so that's what I'll share with you today. So here we go. I'm going to bring out a magic bag, all right? And it's right here. The people on online are going to freak out, but that's okay. Okay, so I've got this magic bag. I'm going to bring it out here. I'll put it right here so everybody can see it. Okay, so here's the magic bag, yes? Now there are 4 boxes in this magic bag, and I'm going to reach in and pull out each one. So I'm going to pull out the first one, and these, by the way, these boxes float. Okay, so I'll put this one over here. You can see it floating now. And what does it say on it? Anybody? You can't see it? Okay. You'll see the ones that fall. So this one says questions. Okay? So, and by the way, Becky has given me permission to let these float throughout the rest of the conference, just so you know, okay? I asked her last night, she said it was okay. So we've got a floating box up here, and it says questions, okay? What does that have to do with creativity? Well, it's critical. You want to frame the problem correctly, et cetera, et cetera. In our work, there are 3 major techniques that we use. Questioning assumptions, problem redefinition, and 20 questions. And it's important to note that our work has really been about which techniques you might use successfully for different kinds of ideation and innovation challenges, okay? So the question techniques are very powerful for strategy work. We just finished a project with TCU, Neely Business School, a 3-month project on their 5-year plan. We got their 25 deans together in person and department heads, and we did a lot of questioning assumptions and 20 questions and problem redefinition, okay? You can also use it, as it turns out, problem redefinition, in fact, for sales challenges we've discovered. And all this stuff that I'm sharing with you today is based on, quote, empirical evidence, meaning I have personally run over 1,000 ideation sessions, or brainstorming sessions, if you want to call it that. My coworkers have run 500. So there's a lot of empirical evidence of what I'm sharing with you today that these different techniques work particularly well against different kinds of challenges, okay? So in terms of the sales challenge, and this is on my TEDx talk, if you want more specificity on the how of this, you can either read my books or you can go on there's a TEDx talk, it's called Solving Impossible Challenges, and my name is on it and you can find it, okay? So the example I give in that TEDx talk is we got a call from Catholic Knights Insurance Company, based in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, about a $100 million firm. They since have changed their name. They called up, they had read my first book and said, hey, can you help us sell more life insurance to Catholics? I said, who is this? You know what I mean? Yeah. We get these strange calls. We get strange calls. And we talked about it, and their charter is they only sell to Catholics. Okay, so to me, selling life insurance is tough enough, but if you can only sell to Catholics, oh my God, this is brutal, right? And so we went out there and we worked with them, and we did the problem redefinition technique, and that was the one. And I hope this is a tweak, and hope you'll be interested. That was the one that led ultimately, 7 months later, the VP of Marketing sent me a note, said, we have increased our sales 52% using that one technique, right? And as I always say in my talks, clearly I undercharged for that assignment, okay? All right, so that's the first box out there. You see it floating. It's the question box, okay? By the way, this is 30 years of work in 15 minutes, just so you know. Okay, let's take out box number 2. Okay, that's floating up there. I can see it on this side, right? I'll turn it around, and it says metaphors. Okay, so what's a metaphor? It's associations. This thing is like that thing, an analog, whatever you want to call it, right? And the whole use of metaphors in the creative field was really pioneered by George Prince and Bill Gordon, whom I knew before they passed away. Bill Gordon was a brilliant guy. They came out of Arthur D. Little in the late 50s, went on to form the company Synectics, okay? And Bill's insight was that it's about principle transfer, right? And so what are some of the metaphorical techniques we use? Idea hooks, a headliner. If any of the engineers here know the TRIZ methodology, where Altshuler, a Russian, had gone through, and his team went through 7 million patents and identified 40 key principles behind those patents, and then we use those as triggers in our ideation session, okay? All right, so that's metaphors. So what's a real world example of that? In your community college, Let's say you're a new president and you've decided, I'm going to change the culture here. I'm going to reinvent this community college. So how would you do that? And we're talking about the culture, how people experience the community college. And so one metaphor you might use is, and you might say, well, geez, I'd love to make it more fun. And so what's a metaphor and analog you might use? What's the most iconic one you can think of? It's probably Disneyland, right? And then what you do is you rip off, you creatively borrow, you adapt things that Disneyland has done to make their world more fun and interesting and creative, right? Into your community college. You know, some years ago when hospitals were suffering, they said, okay, let's look at the metaphor of hotels and see if we can adapt their model to our model, okay? So that's all about principal transfer, right? A real world example for us is that we were called by the United States Tennis Association, and they said, can you help us reinvent the US Open? Love to, right? We also got free tickets. I mean, it was great. So we said, sure, love to. And so what is that nature of that? If we're looking for a metaphorical principal transfer here, how did we define the essence of a US Open? We said it's an event, right? It's an event, okay? And so what are some other events? Just in general. Is a parade an event? Yes, thank you. Becky said yes, okay. A parade is an event. Is a state fair an event? Yes. What's another event? Foo Fighters concert. A concert is an event, etc. Okay, and so you list all these events, and then you say, okay, team, look at the principles and interesting things about that event, and now let's apply it to reinventing the US Open. The one that was one of several that led to, quote, the breakthrough was a Broadway play, which was kind of down the road, right? And so they said, can we take the principles and things going on in a Broadway play and apply them to the US Open? And you may remember several years ago, it's Showtime, right? They did a big campaign around Showtime, and then Saturday night, what? They had all this glaring music and bands and Broadway lights and all this kind of thing. And so they directly transferred that principle. Okay? All right. So this box, you can read that. What's that one say? The first one, questions. What's the second one say? Metaphors. All right. Okay. We got to get our third box out. Clearly, I flunked pantomime school, but here we go. Okay, we'll take out the third box, put it up here, and I can see it. I'll turn it around, and it says visuals. Okay? Visuals are really interesting in terms of triggering new ideas, and I'll share some examples with you. But some of the techniques we use, they're particularly good for insight work, so collaging is kind of neat. When we do supply chain reinvention or process reinvention work, we created this technique we call deja vu, where you work from the end backwards in terms of all your processes. Another one, because the patents, we talked about the patent office today, we realized that we could search keywords and patents, print out those patents relative to the keywords, and use those as triggers, for instance. We invented that technique, and we use that a lot with engineers, and it's extremely successful for inventing new products and services, okay? So what's a visual technique that I'm hoping as educators you all know this one. This is probably one of the 10 techniques I'm going to mention today that you know of, and I really hope you do. If you're not, I'm hoping you will learn about it. So mind mapping, right? So how many have heard of mind mapping as a technique? Okay, a fair number. It was invented in the mid-60s by Tony Buzan. It was an insight in how the brain recalls and remembers and records and recombines things by making something visual, right? And so there are elements. You make it colorful. You sort of do diagramming. Your kids make clustering, right, off a center thing. And you use pictures, right? Yeah, and you use keywords. So there's your 1-minute course in mind mapping. So how would you use that? We got a call from Unilever, and they said, can you help us cut costs? Okay, all right. And we said, love to, yes, not knowing how we'd approach it. But as we thought about it, we said, you know, what if we had all their employees that we worked with, and we did 25 sessions around the country that led to $50 million in savings. We did that by having their employees mind map their jobs and then say, now look at this mind map of all the things you do, right? And what's not fun? What's not working? What's uncomfortable, right? Where are you losing time, et cetera, et cetera. And as they did that, then we laddered up or began to put some of these themes, some of this stuff, and that led to bigger and bigger ideas for cost cutting, okay? The important principle that behind this and what I'm saying is that ideation is not just for what? New products or social media or advertising. It can be for anything, anytime you have a problem. We worked with Norwalk Community College on how their foundation could raise more money, right? So that, you know, it could be anything where there's, if you have a diversity and equity inclusion challenge, right? You can use it for that. African American males, right? The dropout rate is fairly high. We know from the research in community colleges because they don't have a sense of community. Well, as a leader, yes, as a leader, then you may want to do a session with your team about how we deal with that, okay? All right, so we got 3 of our 4 boxes. Let's pull out the last one. And this one is in some ways the most fun, and for all the overly analytical people in the audience, it's probably the most threatening and the most challenging, okay? This one, I can read, I'll turn around. It says fantasy, okay? So there are a whole bunch of techniques around fantasy. So the wish technique. And by the way, when I did a workshop here, I guess it was yesterday now, there are different kinds of wishing because we as adults have trouble wishing, and we think it's foolish, right? So there's sort of realistic wishing, and then if you want to really push your team, you go for, let's violate a law of nature wishing, you know, so teleporting and mind reading and all that kind of stuff, okay? And by the way, when you do these with your teams, if you have an overly analytical group that's skeptical of this stuff, and this sometimes happens with us when we're working with, say, engineers, who are like, what are you doing? We spend a lot of time up front explaining the technique, the how-tos of it, giving the rationale, talking about what resulted. And once you do that, once you make people comfortable with that, then it's okay. Everything will work out, okay? All right, so this fantasy thing, I will give you an example of that. Forgive me for those who were in this session a day ago. I used this example, but I'm going to use it again because it's somewhat iconic for us. We got a call. For 20 years, we've worked with the city of New York, their high potentials, and training them in how to be more creative. And it's really fun. By the way, we do what's called action learning in every kind of training we ever do. We will never do anything that doesn't have action learning. What's action learning? What it is not is come up with 1,000 uses for a brick. Because unless you're in construction, who cares? What we have is people bring real-world issues, okay, to the session. And often we'll have them submit beforehand. We will match up those real-world issues or challenges with a technique. And so they get a BOGO, we would say, right? A twofer. So they not only get ideas, but they'll learn the techniques at the same time, okay? All right, so the iconic thing here is we got, because of our work with the city of New York, we were referred to the state of New York, and we were asked to help the comptrollers of the city of New York, both in New York City and in Albany, be more creative. Okay, I mean, this is not easy, right? Okay, and yet they were fantastic, okay? They were fantastic, okay? So, you know, in Albany, the fantasy technique I used, and I had to set this up for a long time to get them to try it. There's a technique called great thinkers, where you adopt the role of somebody great from history, living or dead, and you imagine that they have now joined your team to reinvent the comptroller's department. In this case, our specific assignment was what new things should we be auditing, okay? And so what we did was, we did the great thinkers, and to make it more approachable, I said, teams, come up with some heroes you have, right? which was fantastic. So we got a list of heroes, and then I say, okay, imagine those heroes are now on your team, and what are some ideas that those heroes would come up with? So one guy, surprisingly, was a big fan of Jim Morrison from The Doors, and he's my hero. Okay. So as we began to explore that and what you associate with that and transferring the principle back, we realized, unfortunately, that he'd died of a drug overdose. And there was this eureka moment and said, oh my gosh, we as an organization need to be auditing drug use in the state of New York much more successfully and much more aggressively and around some very specific things, and we haven't been doing that. So thank you. Okay, so it's this odd stuff, right? Odd stuff that happens. Okay, so those are the 4 boxes, right? Okay, those are what we have identified as 4 classes of ideation techniques, and there are many, many under each one. Now, why do I mention all that, and why go I through it? Because this is the how. If you're doing brainstorming, you're missing the boat, because brainstorming doesn't work. You need to trigger the brain. It works if you haven't worked on a problem before. Oh, you get some ideas, great. But the intractable ones, the tough ones, you really got to use these ideation processes to trigger the ideas. Okay? My time is up, but I want to dovetail with Philip Gaskin thinks. We need a new title at your community college. We've got what? What's the CEO? Chief Entrepreneurial Officer. We need a CIS, a Chief Ideation Strategist on your team, who knows this stuff, who can facilitate this stuff. The last thing I'm going to share with you is from my daughter Caroline, and when she was very, very small. She had a princess outfit on, and she's looking at the mirror. She had her tiara, magic wand, etc. She's looking in the mirror, and she said, and I saw her. She didn't know I was there. She looked in the mirror, and she was deadly serious. She said, I've got a magic wand, and I'm not afraid to use it. And I laughed, and I thought, oh my God, it's so cute. I'm hoping you've seen what I've just shared with you, like Peter Ubroth in a way, as a magic wand, and I'm really hoping you're not afraid to use it. Thank you.